Welcome to Chef Leadership Academy. I'm Professor Jagdish Sheth. This presentation is about new frontiers of research in marketing analytics. Marketing analytics has had an absolutely explosive exponential growth in recent times, and surprisingly, even traditional conceptual academic papers or journals such as Journal of Marketing, Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, and counterpart journals in Europe, for example, all now demand some sort of a empirical research and maybe even a little more of modeling research. In other words, marketing analytics has taken over the world of managerial marketing or strategic marketing. I believe marketing analytics will have exciting new life going forward. And as I will articulate, while at one time techniques were in search of data, down the road, as I see, data will be in search of new techniques, which means that the obsolescence of techniques is more real. The techniques which are very popular today, one that we teach and research, will be forgotten or go in the background, and newer techniques will take over. So let's look at a brief history of marketing science, as it used to be called. There was a conscious effort made in the 50s to make marketing more a science. This is because operations research had come into management, definitely in logistics and production. All functions were getting more scientific in terms of mathematical formulas. Marketing was left behind. It was still considered, like HR, a fairly touchy subject, and therefore did not get the respect as a scientific inquiry. Several young scholars, mostly graduates from University of Chicago or teaching at Carnegie Mellon, began to raise this expectation that marketing can aspire to be more of a science than just the art. There were debates after debates about this one. And in order to make it a science, the focus shifted from descriptive statistics, which is what marketing was all about, counts, to more and more predictive aspects. Can I forecast in the future? Can I predict something that's going to happen, or what we call predictive analytics today? These are the humble beginnings. We also had certainly access to data, which was much harder at one time, but certainly the media companies, which did a lot of research on subscribers, began to share the data. There were longitudinal panel companies, household panels, they began to share the data with the academics. And because of that, marketing got more and more analytical approach, access to the data. Similarly, large-scale computation became more possible because we now got very standardized, very large-scale platform statistical packages. In the old days, the first pioneering was Biomed, BIOMED, at UCLA, designed for health sciences, but became a statistical package, followed by SPSS, for example, and eventually dominated by what we call SAS. Accessibility to these formulas, computerized, large-scale legacy systems where you could put your data and analyze, now as opposed to paper and pencil way of analyzing, suddenly the automation of analysis allowed us to do large-scale data analytics. This even increased further with more and more desktop analytics. As the PC memory became equivalent to mainframe computers, it had both the hardware and the software capabilities. I could put the same statistical packages with lots of memory into my PC now because PC memory was enormous. And therefore, I can also put lots of data, surprisingly, on my PC platform, which allowed more people to access in an easier way I can do research much faster now from anytime, anywhere practically. So PC revolution again contributed toward more and more analytic scientific research. Data analysis, data simulations, all became faster, cheaper, easier. So more scientists, more scholars, more graduate students could do research in a parallel way. Let me now talk about the evolution of different techniques. Marketing analytics has been more technique oriented compared to, let's say, marketing strategy or consumer behavior. So I will focus about the rise of different techniques by different decades. As I mentioned in the 50s, where marketing science begins to emerge in the marketing field, it was the access to longitudinal panel data from MRCA, Market Research Corporation of America. I had huge mag tapes. I probably had 4 or 5 doctoral dissertations analyzing this data on about 14,000 household panels. And MRCA was willing to share the data with academic institutions for research and publications. Chicago Tribune did the same thing. They collected data. They eventually had in Milwaukee, for example, a whole cable panel. And of course, the world changed enormously with the scanner data basically in the hands of IRI. In the 60s, marketing analytics begins to see the popularity of operations research techniques. 2 major techniques that had huge impact in marketing were all the stochastic models from the Bernoulli to the Markov chains. That was fascinating, where Markov chains took more hold into the marketing literature. And on the other side was linear programming or dynamic programming or nonlinear programming. But linear programming was a foundation. Game theory came along a little but did not really stick in the marketing field. It was much more in the economics area. In the 70s, you saw the rise of multivariate techniques. In other words, analytics anchored to economics or operations research began to shift toward more and more psychometric approaches. By the time psychology was more influential in marketing with the rise of consumer behavior, formation of association for consumer research, and therefore in marketing we began to learn techniques, not concepts alone, from other disciplines than economics and sociology. So we had a number of techniques that came out and took off and created a huge excitement in marketing analytics or marketing research. And that included multidimensional scaling, for example, conjoint analysis. Both were developed at Bell Labs for other purposes than marketing actually, but became tools or techniques for doing research in marketing. And of course, multivariate techniques, discriminant analysis, cluster analysis, factor analysis, eventually culminated into what is known as LISREL, L-I-S-R-E-L. LISREL became the de facto model because it was so comprehensive in a multivariate analysis viewpoint. And I could estimate parameters in a more comprehensive way than any other technique would provide. So multivariate techniques is all starting in the 70s and culminating in the 80s essentially. I did a lot of workshops for industry. I taught a doctoral seminar in multivariate techniques at University of Illinois for many years. And to me, that was a fascinating new area of growth because I came into marketing from behavioral sciences perspective rather than from economic perspectives. We did have for a short time in the 80s more the biometric research. Bigger technique was pupil dilation, galvanic skin pressure. More research was done on young children using physiological measures because they could not articulate on a paper and pencil how to respond. Fascinating. That has morphed now into brain research and still continuing, but it is so time consuming, it is so expensive that it is not taking off to the level that one would expect. Although I do believe it's going to happen more and more down the road through more learning imaging research in general. In the 90s, all of this shifts to marketing models. We had primarily choice models. Lots of scholars published in that area, did research in that area, including using game theoretic principles, prisoner's dilemma, whatever they were. But the one that really took off was lifetime value of a customer. And LTV became a dominant paradigm from an analytic viewpoint to say, if you measure the lifetime value of a customer as relationship marketing advocated, it is not the next transaction or the last transaction, but what is the value of a customer over the life cycle of a customer. And this literature began to grow enormously. And like in marketing strategy, market orientation became a dominant paradigm. Customer lifetime value became a dominant paradigm in the marketing analytics. All of throughout this one, going back into the 60s, there was, of course, Operations Research Society, and there will be marketing subdivision. There used to be Management Science Journal. It is still there with a marketing as a subcategory. But then it was the Informs, INFORMS, and Marketing Science Journal, and a separate convention or a conference every year that began to take off the whole marketing analytics into a solid discipline. Very similar to what happened in consumer behavior with the formation of Association for Consumer Research, publication of a journal called Journal of Consumer Research, and it just took off. So marketing analytics and consumer behavior became dominant subdisciplines of marketing. Marketing analytics now is shifting in the new millennium toward big data. So big data and social media are just dominant paradigm now. And this is where I do believe for the first time techniques in search of data will stop, and more data will now motivate the disciplines in marketing or outside in search of new techniques. That's a fascinating reversal. So what are the new frontiers or the next frontiers of research in marketing analytics? The first one is clearly knocking the door, which is text mining. So rather than having alphanumeric data, which is what we used to have, today what we have is just messages. It's all language. So natural language processing has become a new technique altogether. How do you quantify qualitative data? And how do you create a paradigm? It's very much like what happens with language, with syntax, with word, keywords, whatever we do, there's a whole technique. Unfortunately, most marketing scholars never studied those because they were not there when they were graduating. And most of them are now struggling very hard to shift from the traditional econometric way of modeling to actually using natural language processing approach to data mining. So text mining is very large, with the big data becoming bigger and bigger. Second area that I see in my horizon is what I call imaging research. There is so much of image taking place. Any place in the country or the world for that matter, there are cameras after cameras, there are surveillances. London may have the largest concentration of cameras, therefore any movement anybody makes is always recorded. Huge database, mostly images. How do you research those images? So now we are finding that in addition to brain research, which is in the laboratory setting, in a hospital setting, which is very expensive, people are now beginning to really understand that there may be a possibility of face recognition. Face recognition is an emerging technology or a technique, and that does not come from the marketing discipline. And again, marketing analytics scholars will have to go back to school to learn face recognition techniques. Very popular in criminology, very popular in security, homeland security, or in Interpol or something like that. We have the fingerprints on the one hand, but face recognition is through biometric exam is arising more and more. And surprisingly, emerging markets are leading because they have bypassed the whole PC revolution and they are into cell phone revolution. Countries like India, for example, have 1.2 billion people with biometric information, much bigger than any other nation in the world. And they have a whole database that can be now analyzed. China has a similar system going right now. And of course, you have lots of e-commerce people where you have basically recognition by your face when you open your iPhone or iPad or any one of the mobile devices. That's a new area. The third area of research is what I call emoji analytics. As more and more symbols are now included in communication, text messages or email messages, I think there's a huge data availability which is in search of a technique. So the technique actually will come from ideography, which is where the Chinese characters, which are more symbolic, probably would be more interesting to understand how they are organized and how they are interpreted, for example. But emoji analytics is here. Now, one can impose a numerical approach to doing things, but I do believe there will be a standalone technique invented or created by somebody in some other discipline, similar to natural language processing, meant exclusively for emoji analytics. Fourth area, and my preference, I have enjoyed this particular area for many, many years now, is what is known as pattern recognition. Fuzzy logic as a new mathematical approach came in almost in the 80s, heavily used in designing products, electronics especially, such as cameras where you have a very fuzzy image, you don't have full information, but based upon deductive logic, etc., you can fill the missing gaps. And suddenly there is an image that comes through when you don't see the image out there. It's called pattern recognition. Fuzzy logic is the de facto platform, very well known in engineering sciences, or electronic sciences especially. I think pattern recognition will become one more area, especially when you have a large scale images out there, but they do not provide you a picture properly. Next area, and one that is knocking our doors because of phenomena like YouTube and its counterparts, is what I call video analytics. Video analytics is not the same as text analytics or the emoji analytics. We see more and more streaming media every place. Broadcast was replaced by cable. Cable is replaced by streaming technologies by and large. We also have a FaceTime quite a lot. So it's not just the commercial for-profit people sending their information on the internet on streaming areas, such as Netflix, for example, or its counterpart, and every network, broadcaster, or cable is trying to do the same thing. But I think it's average consumers putting their information, such as conversations, FaceTime, or similar to FaceTime, WhatsApp video, just goes on and on. Two-way interactive, real-world communication is coming huge information. Now, how do you analyze that information? I have no clue personally, but I mark my words, there will be a technique designed by somebody in some discipline that we will begin to use in marketing, because you cannot ignore these billions and billions of postings on YouTube practically in a year, and so large viewing on YouTube. It's a phenomenon. Just like Facebook is a phenomenon, YouTube is a phenomenon. Next area, and the last area that I wanted to suggest, would be what I call forensic research. Who done it? Traditional Sherlock Holmes. After a crime is committed, who is the real murderer? Forensic research is now becoming mainstream across all disciplines. Accounting has forensic accounting. Of course, in criminology, it is very common. All of the investigative bodies have training in forensic research. How do you take partial evidence and piece together into something which is holistic? So, with cybersecurity becoming very key emerging issue from analytics viewpoint, there will be event analysis. Often forensic analysis or forensic research happens after an event. It's investigative reporting or investigative research in some fashion. That's a very different domain. None of our econometric or multivariate techniques are capable of analyzing that kind of a research or data. So, as I mentioned, in the past, techniques were in search of data, which was my generation 55 years ago, where we were all having data, and now we say which techniques. We had the techniques where we were looking for data. Now, in the future, data will be in search of new techniques. So let me conclude this presentation. Since the 50s, marketing has been striving to become a science by shifting focus from descriptive analysis or statistics to predictive modeling. Over time, marketing analytics has been driven by techniques starting with longitudinal household panel data and the use of operations research and multivariate techniques. It has evolved into econometric modeling and choice models, including focus on customer lifetime value. Today, marketing analytics are focused on big data and social media analytics. I think there are 6 new emerging areas where the next generation of scholars will focus and publish very well respected academic journals. And the 6 areas are text mining, imaging research, emoji analytics, pattern recognition, video analytics, and forensic research. As I mentioned in the past, techniques were in search of data. In the future, data will be in search of techniques. It is inevitable that we will discover or innovate new techniques suitable for the data. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture or presentation on next frontiers in marketing analytics. Thank you very much.